Are you serious? Are you serious? I'm inside the newsroom here where we're gathering the information. We have breaking news, of course, coming out of Asia in South Korea. According to reports, South Korean Air Force jets have fired 360 rounds. I repeat, 360 rounds of warning shots after Russian military plane twice violated South Korea's airspace off the country's east coast, according to Seoul, South Korean officials, in an announcement that has quickly been disputed by Russia. But how do you dispute it? South Korea said 3 Russian military planes, 2 of them were Tu-95 bombers, and 1 was an A-50 airborne early warning and control aircraft, entered into South Korean air defense identification zone off its east coast before the A-50 intruded into South Korean airspace. Russians said that the 2 of its Tu-95 bombers were on a routine flight over neutral waters and didn't enter South Korean territory. But the South Koreans just said that's not true. According to South Korean government accounts, the unspecified number of South Korean fighter jets were scrambled. A bunch of F-16s scrambled to the area, and they fired 10 flares and 80 rounds from a machine gun as warning shots at the Russian bombers. Seoul defense officials said that Russian reconnaissance aircraft left the area 3 minutes later, but later returned and violated the South Korean airspace again for 4 minutes. What? What is Boot Scootin' Putin doing? And the official said that South Korean fighter jets then fired 10 more flares and another 280 rounds from machine guns as warning shots toward the Russian aircraft. Now, South Korea said that it was the first time a foreign military plane had violated South Korean airspace since the end of the 1950 through 1953 Korean War. What is Russia doing? So, Russian Defense Ministry said in a statement that its planes did not enter South Korean airspace. It said that South Korean fighter jets didn't fire any warning shots, and though it said they flew near the Russian planes in what is called unprofessional maneuvers, and that they are the ones that pose the threat. If the Russian pilots felt there was a security threat, they would have responded, says the statement. But South Korea's presidential national security advisor Chung Il-young told top Russian security officials that the South Korean views Russia's airspace violation very seriously and will take a much stronger measure if similar incident ever occurs again, according to South Korea's presidential office. Matter of fact, President Moon is not playing games and is sending a very clear message to President Vladimir Putin. Now, the former Soviet Union reported that North Korea had provided the country with weapons during the Korean War, which killed millions of South Koreans. And back in 1983, Soviet Air Force fighter jets fired an air-to-air missile at South Korean passenger jet plane that strayed into Soviet territory, killing all 269 people on board. According to relations between Seoul, South Korea, and Moscow, gradually has improved, and they established diplomatic ties in 1990, a year before the breakup of the Soviet Union. The airspace that the South Korean says that the Russian warplane violated is above a group of South Korean-held inlets roughly halfway between South Korea and Japan that have been a source of territorial disputes between the two Asian countries, and that Russia isn't part of those disputes. Japan, which claims ownership over the inlets, protested to South Korea for firing these warning shots over Japanese airspace. And South Korea later countered that it cannot accept the Japanese statement, repeating that the inlets are South Korean territory and that Japan also protested to Russia for allegedly violating Japanese airspace. So South Korea said 3 Russian planes entered the South Korean air defense identification zone, and then 2 Chinese bombers. South Korea said the Chinese planes didn't intrude, though, upon the South Korean airspace. So you see what happened. The Russians had 2 bombers and a 3rd plane that entered South Korean airspace. The South Koreans fired 10 flares and then 80 machine gun shots at them and backed them off, only to have all 3 of these Russian planes to return 4 minutes later and fly into South Korean territory, where the South Koreans had scrambled several F-16 fighter jets, fired 10 more flares, and 280 machine gun rounds at these 3 planes as warning shots. Not trying to hit them, but as warning shots to get them out of the way. And then we also hear now that the Chinese then scrambled 2 fighter bombers and sent them into the area, but did not send them into the South Korean airspace. So the Russian statements accuse South Korea of trying to hamper the flights of these Russian jets that they say might have been headed over toward China. Guys, South Korea's airspace and China's airspace, there's thousands of miles in between, okay? There's like a whole country called North Korea, okay, in between. So, look, anyway, Russia could just go over to China without even getting over there. Their borders are right there real close to each other. Okay, so there's no reason for this. This was a test. This was a bold move by the Russians. Nobody had ever flown into South Korean airspace in almost 60 years, and Russia has been flexing its muscles a lot lately, sending people into different locations. So you don't want to miss today's live broadcast. I'll be live at 12 noon Eastern, but we're going to stay on top of this story. It is huge as the world is gone mad and tensions are everywhere. Of course, that blood moon, we just had the blood moon. Will there be peace? Will there be war? What does this all mean in the times we're living in? Tensions everywhere. And you see, China was kind of coming out there a little bit, looked like they were backing the Russians. Now, there was no report of any American aircraft launched at this time, okay? But the Chinese did jump out there. They didn't get in anybody's airspace, but they were out there. We're going to keep a close eye on what's going on. I'll be back with more current world events and how they relate to biblical prophecy, reporting this from the Salvation Station here in the newsroom. I'll be back later with more. Give your life to Jesus Christ. We're living in the last days.